Hello and welcome to Automated, Polymath Robotics weekly podcast, where we talk about robots and how to build them. I, of course, am Stefan Seltz-Oxmacher, CEO and co-founder of Polymath Robotics and one of your hosts here. Across from me is a gentleman wearing a t-shirt that is rubbing in my face that I do not actually come from the best co-op program in the world. He went to a school that my school can't seem to remember exists, let alone being way better at all rankings. Who exactly are you, sir?
Today, definitely wearing the Waterloo pride right on the metaphorical and physical sleeve. Yeah.
Welcome again to Automated. This is our weekly robotics podcast where we have two parts of each episode. The first is where we play a game to spitball a robotics startup. And the second is we'll talk about some, serious or interesting topic in robotics. That being said, it may or may not be April 1st right now. And that may or may not mean that we're going to be super serious. So probably by now we've already released a blog announcing publicly our decision to abandon ROS, abandon C++, abandon all well-known programming languages to go to the one true programming language to rule them all. What language is that, Ilya?
So it's definitely, forget C++, especially the modern version.
Forget Objective-C.
Yeah. No,
forget C.
We need to move to Holy C.
Yes.
Under the underlying system of Temple OS.
Yes.
We have seen the light. Mm-hmm. The new ways to run code is definitely the right way.
Yep. I mean, the best thing about a programming language and operating system is when it comes with a simple attack helicopter game. That for me means this is what we should build our robots off of.
No, I think the best feature of Temple OS is if you press, I think, the enter key over and over in any directory, it'll just start to spew gibberish at you. Good. That is definitely required on robots.
It's important for safety critical systems to spew gibberish.
Yeah.
So with that being said, given that it is April 1st, we'll be doing a bit of a bizarro version of our game and our segment. For our game today, we will actually start with technology that is real and buildable and figure out what somebody could actually do that might be valuable with it. And then the second segment, I will do a bit of a costume switch, and Ilya will pitch that company to me, playing the role of Sand Hill Road VC, who is totally up with all the AI and the robotics and the autonomy. Because I read a couple of blog posts and I talked to an influencer last week.
It's going to be great and totally not frustrating.
So that being said, let's start our game. And Ilya, for this game, I'm thinking we pose as a seasoned company that has done some robotics work. If you're a robotics company that's been living without VC dollars for a while, you're probably doing something for the Defense Department. So I guess thinking what could we have built for them that might be applicable to a broader market? So what are some areas that folks might have worked in before?
Yeah. So historically, the most real robotics application in defense has been actually bomb defusal.
Yeah.
Or bomb disposal. Whichever is the right term.
Because humans and bombs are a good combination or a bad combination. I'm not quite sure.
I don't think they mix very well.
Huh. Like oil and water.
Yeah. That's true. I was going to say, explosive consequences, but anyway. Yeah, so it's funny because we can get into a whole philosophical discussion of if teleoperated machines are really robots, but let's call them robots.
Yeah.
A lot of groups have put together machinery that you can use to remotely go and look at something, or manipulate something in the case of bomb disposal, or even shoot at something. But those are more rare.
A lot of people have built that. So maybe a more useful thing is say some squad of badasses is showing up on a beach and they don't know whether there's landmines on the beach or not. How can they solve that problem, relatively easily?
And even the higher level question of if your robot is presented with an unknown space, how do you cover it most effectively?
Yeah.
Right. And so the way that this group had come up with to do this is at the time when they're developing this, there wasn't a lot of compute. There wasn't a lot of sensors. And even if there had been, they're not ruggedized for military applications.
Yep.
There's a few good, slight tangent.
We're talking 80s, 90s ish.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That timeline. A slight tangent. There's a few good robotics companies that produce kind of almost RC cars they can just throw through a window and
Yep.
they'll survive a 20-foot drop onto concrete
Yep.
and drive around. But anyway, so this company, what they had done is they developed a algorithm to mathematically prove out that by bumping around.
They had a robot that they could just throw on a beach.
Well, I don't remember if they got to a physical robot or if they got to a concept robot. I'm pretty sure they built a few prototypes. I don't think they had like a final product.
Okay.
Or if they did, they never publicly released it.
But they were paid a whole lot of money for it one way or the other.
Yeah, exactly. And so they wanted to show off how to optimally cover an area. In the particular case that we've heard, it was cover a beach to make sure that if there's landmines or if there's somebody standing by and watching the beach, that you trip over whatever security system basically by bumbling right into it. So it sounds like a very particular application.
I mean, like, to me, that seems relatively simple. Like, you throw the robot on the beach, and then it figures out, where the water is, turns 90 degrees away from that, drives 20 meters, turns 90 degrees away from the water, goes up a foot, turns 90 degrees left and goes back, and just kind of does a back and forth pattern like that.
I mean, it's lovely to think about that, but your first sentence of figures out where the water is has immediately made this an impossible problem. I don't even think modern good computers can define what a water's edge looks like accurately anyway.
And of course, there's a whole issue of where is the water's edge.
Yeah, exactly.
As a fun fact for the listeners who don't know this one, it's almost
impossible
to measure shorelines.
Yeah.
Because the closer you measure shorelines in, the smaller the unit of measurement, the larger the shoreline becomes. To the point where a country's shoreline can triple or double or quadruple if you're looking at it on a mile frame versus a, tens of feet frame versus an inch frame.
Yeah. If you measure the British Isles in centimeters and you measure Canadian coastline in kilometers, you'll find the British Isles have a longer coastline, which is interesting. But yeah, so instead of trying to do accurate turns, instead of trying to localize ourselves on the beach, find out where the water is, basically we can mathematically show that under certain conditions, you can have a heuristic algorithm to random walk the beach.
Huh.
So you drive, it doesn't matter where you land, you just start driving in a random direction, roughly straight. You don't even have to be accurately straight.
Mm-hmm.
And you bump into an obstacle, you turn a random amount, and there is a heuristic here. It's not always just random on top of random.
Yep.
You decide if you bump 3 times, then you're probably in a corner, so you should turn roughly 180 degrees to get out of that corner. There's kind of additions to the heuristics. But roughly speaking, you could call it a random walk.
Yeah.
And you random walk around the space. And they this group proved that to a reasonable rigor that their heuristic set covered an unknown space as efficiently as possible.
Yeah.
So that was kind of their main...
Especially because the guys in the boat waiting for this, they can't wait there all day.
Yeah, they can't wait like 5 hours. Yeah.
They need to get off the little dinghy and go, shoot Banana Republic presidents as quickly as possible. They can't just, go fishing.
Something about Cuba? Anyway. don't want to go in that direction. But yeah, so for those who haven't caught on quite yet, the company
so if we have that and we built that before spoiling the lead,
all right.
What could we do usefully with that? So one thing I think of is if you're pouring concrete and you want the concrete to be very flat, you could use this for inspection.
Maybe. What's interesting is you need to think of a task where it doesn't actually matter where you are. Mm-hmm. So if you're doing inspection and you find a fault, you kind of want to report back that the fault is here relative to some point, right? Yeah. Unless you just stop and start wailing.
Well, you don't want to just say, hey, by the way, in this 100,000 square foot warehouse, some of the concrete's not right.
Yeah, exactly.
You're saying that's not valuable?
That's probably not valuable. To an earlier episode, we immediately break out the robotic spray can and spray down, Joe screwed up here.
All right, so inspection of construction probably doesn't work.
Because the robot honestly has no idea where it is.
Yeah, and really any informed inspection, whether it's the temperature's different, the floor is wrong, it doesn't work unless you're allowed to just stop and wail.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe what you could do is if you had a sniffer for anthrax or some other bad thing, then it's appropriate to stop and start wailing and crying and say, uh-oh. But besides that...
Or a security application where you like if you're trying to secure a location and you want a non-predictable patrol path, that could work there as well.
Yeah.
The same idea, right? Any case where you can just stop and do something.
Yeah. Or just stop and complain.
Yeah, stop.
Like it's really it's a good robot to be a loud complainer.
Or the other option is in the mine clearing case, your goal is really to 100% cover an area as efficiently as you can, including weird nooks and crannies and those sort of things. So other cases might be something like painting.
Yeah.
Right? Where on a wall, it matters to have nice, consistent brushstrokes.
Yep.
But if you're doing something like painting epoxy onto a concrete floor, it doesn't actually matter that much. You just want, because it'll self-level.
Yeah.
You just want kind of a rough cover.
Yeah, so you could do floor painting. If you had to do wall painting, then you add a whole lot more articulation.
Yeah.
It becomes a lot more complicated.
And you need to be afraid of obstacles. You don't want to paint over a light switch or something stupid. Like Yeah, so that makes it a much harder problem.
Yeah. I mean, the one thing that seems kind of obvious that you could do with something like this, I don't really know if this would be feasible, is maybe you could like vacuum a floor this way.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of reminds you of the company I was about to mention a little while ago. So for those who haven't caught on, this is the true story of how iRobot developed the Roomba, or at least the true story as far as we know. Right? Yeah. We weren't there, but this is what we've gathered, is that they went from their military side to basically seeing what could they use this defunct Pathfinder algorithm for, and they settled on floor cleaning.
Yeah, because especially if you vacuum every day or twice a day, it doesn't really matter if you get everything immediately.
And it doesn't matter how crappy the coverage is. Yep. They kind of mathematically showed that it will cover the entire area given enough time. Eventually. Yeah. Exactly. And more than that, because it's not repeating the same pattern over and over, it actually is less likely to get stuck in stupid behaviors.
Yep.
So what's really funny, kind of again, one slight tangent, is iRobot originally built it this way because they didn't have the money for a consumer vehicle, especially in like the late 90s, early 2000s, where the early Roombas came out, to put on a camera and perception systems and mapping and that sort of stuff. So that the random kind of walk was super effective. But what was funny is they were really reluctant to change to mapping and orderly cleaning, because they could show that with orderly cleaning, if you're cleaning north to south or east to west or something like that, you can always set up a space such that it will miss a corner.
Yeah.
Right. It's basically the argument of ray tracing in a space, right? Like any direction you point, you're going to end up with suboptimal coverage on something, unless you add in heuristics on top of your route cleaning. And if you're adding heuristics on top of route cleaning, your whole thing might as well be heuristics.
Well, what I also like on this is, you know, if it was generally affordable as a weapon to the military in like 1995 or 1990, it was cheap enough to sell to consumers in 2008, 2010, 2005. Just like as compute gets cheaper and motors get cheaper, and it's generally speaking, advanced military technology becomes consumer affordable within a couple of decades.
I mean, generally, I agree with your idea. In this particular one, the story is even more interesting than that.
Okay.
Again, there's some really great teardown videos and discussions from people who are actually there. I highly recommend people go watch those to get firsthand accounts of this. But in development of the Roomba, the most problems they had were actually to make the thing resilient to vacuuming every day for 10 years. Or for 5 years, or even 2 years. Dust gets everywhere.
And whereas weapons, it's kind of okay if this gets shot. It's kind of okay if this only works twice.
Yeah.
Because if it means some SEAL Team 6 member doesn't step on a landmine once, it's done its
worth
job.
It. Exactly.
Yeah.
There's a fun
which to be fair, anytime anyone's ever brags about their engineering being military grade, that's code word for it's expensive and shitty. Because it costs a whole lot of money and it works like 4 times.
4 times. Exactly. It works very reliably, but for 4 times.
And you can shoot it probably.
Yeah. So actually that's a quick tangent. There's a good Soviet era kind of engineering question that would happen, where the professor would put a missile engine and a jet engine, photos of them, of course, because they're big. And he'd say, both of these things produce the same amount of thrust. Why don't we use rockets everywhere? And the answer is the rocket produces that thrust for 30 seconds and the jet engine produces that thrust for 40 hours. So that's the difference. So again, coming back to it, a lot of effort went into dust proofing everything, making all the mechanisms reliable and injection moldable, right? For plastic to make it.
In other words, making the robot shippable
to consumers, right?
Who can't, take it apart and rewire it if there's a problem,
or just can't afford a $50,000 price tag for custom machined metal parts.
Sensitive that way,
right? Exactly. The other cool thing, though, if you look at teardowns of the original Roombas, it's this amazing, enormous circuit board full of discrete components.
Yeah,
like every single piece of it is, all the logic is baked out of almost all the way down to individual logic circuits, like NOR gates and NAND gates.
That's
like
cool.
It's crazy. Like it is really betrays the like 1990s military era pedigree of the design. And then as time goes on, if you keep looking at the teardowns, you look at modern ones, they're very much like cell phones, where it's just a circuit board with one giant processor and a little bit of support stuff, and that's it. That's all that's in there.
That's all that's really needed.
Yeah, exactly.
So that being said, now that we have our business of consumer grade robotic vacuum cleaners, why don't we switch things up to the next bizarro April Fool's segment of our thing, where you retain being a founder of this robotic vacuum cleaning company, and I become a great Sand Hill Road DC, and I'll introduce myself as such in our next segment. Don't you worry, I'll let you know how cool I am.
Let's transition over. I'm pitching a floor cleaning robot that's never existed before. Imagine we live in a world where everything's the same except nobody's made Roomba-like devices. And I'm coming up with this little puck that cleans your floor poorly most of the time, but does it every day.
Great pitch. I, of course, am Ed, the great Sand Hill Road investor. As way of background, I spent some time at Google, where I was a product manager exactly long enough to claim multiple projects as my win. I also am friends with a number of people who have looked at robots. Some even have told me whether to invest in robotics companies or not. I attended the DARPA Grand Challenge, by which I mean, of course, I watched a video online, but I watched it like at only 1.5x speed. So I'm pretty well versed, and I've been looking at this robotic space for a while. So I guess one of the questions, I've looked at your robot, and I'm curious as to why doesn't it have cameras?
Yeah, so we see the robotic floor cleaning space as something we can basically create this market. Right now, everybody uses a vacuum cleaner. Mm-hmm. They have to do it every day. You and I have to do it every day. We think that this small, relatively inexpensive device can be added on to improve your everyday vacuuming so that you don't have to do it as often. You only have to do it once a month. The reason we can't use a camera is to make it an add-on device, it has to be cheap.
Yeah.
And cameras and the processing for them immediately blows up the cost to the point where we can't make it cheap.
Well, I guess, like, how do I know that, this isn't going to kill my cat or cut the toes off my toddler?
Oh, well, it is very small.
Okay.
It is very light.
Okay.
It travels roughly at a snail's pace. Okay. And the brushes are soft. So it's kind of inherently safe. The only scary part about it is if it fell down the stairs. Which is why we built in cliff sensors. Okay. So anytime it gets up to the staircase, it'll back up and go away.
I mean, I do have a large house, and my house has many flights of stairs in it. So are you saying this can't? I don't think I'll have this go on one floor of my estate?
Oh yeah, absolutely. If you have multiple floors, you need multiple robots, or you need to transport it from floor to floor by hand.
I mean, I saw a pitch from a company in a TechCrunch article the other week, and they claimed to be able to go up and down the stairs. So how are you going to compete against them?
I would be surprised if they could make that affordable.
I mean, they seem pretty smart. They did go to Google. They did work at Google, and they went to Stanford.
Yeah, there's been a lot of good academic research, but I haven't seen anybody who can deploy legs for less than $5,000. Whereas we want to really target the sweet spot of like $200 or $300 for a robot vacuum cleaner. Maybe if we stretch it $1,000, maybe if it's really fancy.
I mean, one of my associates at a firm down the street invested in $10 million round of theirs. Are you saying that they're wrong? I mean, they were on the Midas list. They're one of the most successful VCs of all time.
Maybe they have some technology I haven't thought of. Maybe.
I mean, it would make sense. That team does have a number of people who were, senior at Google.
Yeah. I still think even if they have really magical technology, it's still going to be more expensive to add legs than to have wheels. Like it might be just a little bit more expensive, but in that even, it might be twice as expensive, but then maybe we can occupy the lower segment of the market.
I think they have a solution that's not quite legs, but I think they found some ways around that problem.
Do you happen to know?
It's not my position as a VC to tell you.
Okay, yeah, fair enough.
I'm throwing up in my mouth a little bit playing this part.
Sorry, I have to keep a straight face.
So it was kind of you guys to send me one of these robots to try out. I noticed that in my house, it seems to bump into a lot of things. Is that something you're going to be able to solve in the next version?
We're not planning to solve it right now. Part of that bumping feature is because it's kind of navigating randomly. To keep it low, we haven't actually added any obstacle avoidance. That it has a bump sensor or a few bump sensors, and it really needs to get close to nooks and crannies to clean them out with the little brush on the side.
It bumped into my wife's ancestral side table that her family got from the 14th shake of the Qajar dynasty. So maybe you can't sell this premium product to people with premium households.
That might be the case. If I have to think about it, we could add some sort of obstacle avoidance as an upgrade feature in the future. We could certainly add a camera, technology being what it is today, unlike what it was in the 90s. We could add machine learning obstacle avoidance in a future version, but for now, it's kind of blind. So maybe we won't target that segment. That segment, or kind of our segment, is probably going to be the tech forward sort of 20 to 40-year-olds, maybe couple or single person, maybe busy parents. We haven't thought too much about that, about just having this robot roll around in a space where it's okay if it bumps into something lightly.
So normally our cleaning lady, Glotilda, vacuums our house, and she does a very nice pattern on the carpet where she'll kind of do these individual lines from the different corners of the carpet and then spiral out from them. Is that something you guys could do?
Definitely not with this machine. We don't want to go into the market space of doing patterns.
It also I see this thing working in the living room, and it's just going in random directions. I just don't believe that it's cleaning. It's like over here by the piano, and then it's over there by the fountain, and then it stops by the exotic fish tank. And it's not clear to me, Glotilda would never vacuum like this.
I got to tell you about this algorithm, right? Okay. The algorithm we developed it from a military application, and we think it actually covers the space the most effective way. So this random kind of looking pattern will give you the best clean in the smallest amount of time.
But that other company on TechCrunch, their thing just goes back and forth across the room. Why does that not work? That's the same way they do it that way. Glotilda does it that way. You're the only person who seems to do this random mishmash pattern.
Yeah, it's to do orderly looking patterns. You're paying a lot of money for sensors and compute just to make something look pretty.
But isn't compute going to get cheaper with Moore's law?
Yeah, for sure. But
aren't sensors going to be cheaper? So why not just build it the right way now?
But we want to launch our product now, right? We want to hit our market while we have this kind of early.
But they're launching it right now.
Yeah, it's there. It's out there. I think they're launching to kind of a restricted release, and they haven't discussed how expensive their system is. We really want to sell our thing.
The numbers I've seen from theirs, it seems very comparable in price to you.
Yeah, that'll be interesting.
Well, this sounds great. We're excited to cheer for you from the sidelines.
That's the polite way of saying no, right, Mr. VC?
That's one of the worst ways VC is saying no. The worst part about that simulation is it's actually a more open and transparent VC or investor than you normally
get.
My
God. You have to develop a whole science on looking at the Zoom call and figuring out what this angle of eyebrow means.
or even admitting that they saw the company on the street and asking you the direct questions. Usually you get like one question about like, why are you better than them?
Yeah.
And like, oh yeah, the algorithm. Yeah, but the algorithm looks messy. But it works better. I don't know.
We have some data. Doesn't matter.
Yeah, so it was hard to pretend to be that investor. So eager to get back to.
Whereas I found it entirely reasonable to be the very flustered,
frustrated roboticist. Though I would say one of my biggest downfalls is when people say that stupid stuff to me, I just get more frustrated than you, verbally frustrated than you do. And like, no, you're wrong. That's not how it works. Nevertheless, I thought maybe we could touch on for 5 to 10 minutes to kind of glean a future episode talking about what's gone on in the market in the last couple of weeks, because right before we went to a conference, there was a banking run on our bank. Yeah.
I think I don't remember. We might have mentioned it, maybe not, but we're totally fine. Everything's okay due to Stefan's slight prescience at 3 a.m. I think we transferred.
Or panic. Stop clock's got to be right once.
They both start with P. I'll take it. Persuasiveness.
Yeah.
Whatever. So we were fine, and we've continued to play a little bit of a whack-a-mole as there's a little bit of concern on different banks and things like that. But overall, everything went okay. Especially
now that we have a new business banker from a large bank. A retail banker has cold called me 14 times in the last 2 days, who we recently deposited money with, trying to see if I also want to open up a checking account. And that was he sent me text messages of, we need to talk ASAP. And I thought like, oh my God, is there a run on the bank? Are we in trouble? Do we need to do something to get interest on our money? Nope. It's just open a checking account, please. So at a really high level, to kind of explain the crisis that happened to people, a couple of weeks ago on a Wednesday night, I was hanging out with the team trying to get stuff done. I started catching up on some WhatsApp groups I'm in and this, that, and the other. And I noticed that, and in one of them, a founder group, people shared an article about liquidity issues at Silicon Valley Bank, which is the main bank for startups and kind of the bank that you'd be dumb for not using as of 3 weeks ago. And people started saying, wow, is SVB stable? This seems weird. So I saw that and it reminded me a lot of the silliness of 2008. Texted Ilya at night saying, hey, you can make fun of me for this in 2 weeks, but I'm going to wire like half of our money or a quarter of our money out of SVB. The next day, every thread was panic. So I wired more money out. And the day after that, this bank that had about $190 billion in assets maintained 15 billion of those in like cash for withdrawals. In a single day, people tried to wire $45 billion out of the account, which meant that by like 9:03 a.m. Pacific, the FDIC took over the bank and declared it dead, which was stressful. However, we'd gotten enough money out fast enough that we could still make payroll, which for us was on that next Wednesday. That weekend, people were talking about runs on our payroll provider for some reason. People were talking about runs on every bank.
There's people lined up outside of both SVB and First Republic and a whole bunch of others.
And like walking money across the street to deposit money at Chase.
Yep.
There was prominent VCs were actively telling their portfolio members to run on the bank.
Which is illegal.
Yeah, like is actually illegal. Though I'm sure none of them will be prosecuted with anything.
It was a suggestion.
Yeah, it was a suggestion of take all your money out of the bank.
It's the same as the mafia suggests that you get protection, or else it wouldn't be a shame if something happened to your house.
But I think more interesting than replaying the history.
Well, one last funny note is I got 2 different calls from my First Republic, because I bank with them privately, being like, hey, by the way, do you want to move your business accounts to us while all this chaos is ongoing? No.
Especially because that weekend I was also hearing about runs on First Republic.
Right. With people lined up outside their door.
It's a very scary time. All right before we go to a trade show where we're going to launch another product and we have another customer demoing something that Friday.
You wrote an article about SVB.
Yeah, I actually, I feel like we won pretty heavily on that. We got covered in a TechCrunch article, and I wrote an article about why SVB is great, which is, of course, now annoying me that my new banking situation is way less great. So I'm hoping
it was a heartfelt, honest appraisal. It's not just us.
Though Forbes unfortunately took it down. I don't know if I told you that.
Oh, I didn't know.
Yeah, so I posted an article in Forbes that was a love letter to SVB, and then my Forbes editor-ish, Forbes is basically Medium with a better name at this point, but like my editor-ish sent me a thing that like it was beyond my scope and took it down because it had like,
remember that.
Yeah, which annoyed
Whatever.
me. At some point I'll find somewhere else to publish that has a good name.
Medium, why not?
Yeah, maybe. But all that being said, I guess what's interesting to me is how this is going to affect the robotics market. And there's a very particular way that I think is worth digesting in 5 to 10 minutes, and then we can save more of it for next week. So when I was doing Starsky, in addition to raising I think $5 million in our seed, $17 million in our A, we spent in the grand total probably $2 to $5 million in hardware. So $150,000 per truck that we retrofitted. We leased a bunch of trucks. Some of those had costs associated that weren't paid for by trucking revenue. And in all of that, like there's a very common refrain that turning equity dollars into hardware is basically never a good idea, right? Like if you're selling 1% of your company for, $100,000, buying $100,000 worth of hardware that will not grow exponentially is a bad use of that equity dollar. So what we did at Starsky is we took on about $4.5 million of venture debt, which was essentially SVB financing our hardware expenses and extending our runway. Money that they did not recoup when that company shut down. If you're a robotics company and someone in your organization is reasonably smart about finance, and you have been in that stage since before last April when interest rates started going up, you've probably looked at taking on venture debt, or you have taken on venture debt. And what's hard to say now is whether that's good anymore.
Yeah.
One of the rumors, just to put the simplest term out there, one of the rumors that was happening that chaotic weekend of the SVB collapse was maybe FDIC will make everyone whole except for those who owe debt to SVB, in which case they will keep that cash, which could mean that if you had $3 million left in your bank account, you had financed $5 million worth of robots suddenly, and you were only burning, $200,000, $300,000 a month. You might have gone from having 10 months of runway to being out of business tomorrow.
Yeah. And the other fun thing I noticed was immediately overnight sprung up a bunch of kind of relief efforts for tech companies. A lot of them well-intentioned, some of them with a 23%
incredibly
interest.
Predatory.
Yeah. 23% interest rate.
Yeah.
Wow. That's something I haven't seen outside of the history books.
Yeah.
Like that was an interesting response.
But I mean, like with regards to like the venture debt stuff, like what I think is possible is that like the whole economics of being a robotics company is about to get a lot harder, especially if you're full stack. If you have to buy a $100,000 vehicle, put $50,000 to $100,000 worth of stuff on it, and you are the operator, which is kind of the default way that people build robots, you either now have to be incredibly lean with your headquarters staff, or you have to raise at an incredibly high valuation, or you have to be incredibly well diluted, like diluted to the tune of selling 50% of your company for your seed, 50% for your Series A, and kind of being like Aaron Levy from Box, who like IPO'd with like 3% ownership in the company.
Yeah.
Might be the only way that that's financially possible, unless you can find someone else to own the assets.
Yeah. So I think we'll do a deeper dive into what we at least think this means for the larger market, but at least to give you guys a taste of.
Yeah, we're more than a little bit concerned about how it impacts robotics, and we'd love to hear from you if you have thoughts on how it's impacted you thus far.
We'd still love to do our first guest host episode.
Yeah, one of these days. But yeah, with that being said, Ilya, I guess we'll be diving into that more next week, so I don't have to ask you an open question.
So either that or something else, but we will cover that topic soon, I promise. Our editorializing isn't as rigid as that quite yet. So we'll find a good topic. We'll see you next time.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for joining us, guys, and keep on automating it.